suppose if I'm honest, I'm a little depressed by the fact that acknowledging that everyone has the right to be who they want to be and live their life how they want to live it, as long as they're not hurting anyone else, should merit any kind of special award or special mention, because it's common sense, isn't it? Whilst we do live in this world, I am honoured to receive this. I'm thrilled to be here and to be a part of this night. Pride is very important in our house. It's a family affair. We have skin in the game. So this event tonight thrills me. It gives me hope. It gives me fire. It gives me energy and deep joy. And even if I feel I don't really deserve this, I'm very pleased and very proud to be receiving it. Thank you all so much.
Good news, everyone! Tonight, David versus Goliath. Jack Turban tackles the New York Times. An Ohio mom speaks out, and more. Good news starts right now. First up, David Tennant, proving that his Doctor Who role was typecasting, won an award for his ongoing efforts to stand up to bullies who seem to have all the power in a repressive society. As we saw in the lead-in, the former Doctor, who does have a trans child, recently received a British LGBT award for using his celebrity to make a difference. And as he correctly pointed out, his position shouldn't even be noteworthy. Naturally, the hateful queen of Turf Island had to stick her nose in the most foolish way possible. Posting on X, because of course she was, she took a single line out of the transcript of an interview he gave later at the event and said that it said something very different from what it plainly said, while presenting a screenshot of a text extract from the transcript from the interview, which is a long way to go just to publicly and obviously tell on your own lie while you're doing the lying. It was so blatant. Even many of her own sycophants, who were willing to yes and all of her unhinged nonsense up to this point, up to and including Holocaust denial, could no longer double think away the constant goal-shifting, fallacy-riddled, brainworm-infested bigotry and bad intentions, and abandoned ship. Meanwhile, she got dragged. No, he's just talking about you. You're proving his point. No, he isn't. He's talking about the minority of cis women who think that they speak for the majority of women when they don't even speak for the majority of SA survivors. We have asked you a lot, repeatedly, not to weaponize our pain to hurt trans people. And my personal favorite, I know you're a fiction author, but this is just too unrealistic, Robert. While David, more beloved than ever, didn't lower himself to addressing Joe in particular, lobbed a stone at the Goliath of trans-exclusionary radical fascism, recently rechristened thanks to Rowling herself as the Gender Taliban. And while he didn't bring down the giant altogether the same way his biblical namesake did, Rowling's compulsions forced her to get defensive about it anyway. And it wasn't just putting words in David's mouth or pretending to speak for women who have vocally stated that A, she does not, and B, please stop using us as pawns for her own ends, but also that she doesn't know what she's talking about. Women are already in jail with sex offenders, Joanne, because there are women sex offenders. And fun fact, sexual assault between prisoners is twice as common among women than among men. But most of all, she doesn't actually care about women. All her efforts have been devoted to harming a specific group of women exclusively. She hasn't found time to get around to doing anything about any of the problems she pretends to champion. For example, women prisoners. She loves to talk about the threat of sexual violence, but she hasn't done a blessed thing to help protect women from the shockingly high rate of assaults by male guards, because she doesn't actually care about women. None of the gender Taliban do. And when you mind what they do, and not just what they say, that becomes blindingly obvious. Their sole interest is misogyny in much the same style as the anti-suffragist movement from around the turn of the 20th century. It's almost ironic that the gender Taliban appropriated the suffragist colors. I have to say almost because, like all conspiracy theories, every single thing they do to attempt to bolster their position is some form of lie. So it isn't ironic, it's intentional. They stand for the exact opposite values of that noble movement. So, like the wolf in sheep's clothing, they must wrap themselves in the trappings of that which they work to undermine as a means of disguise and deceit. David caused the occasional Mr. Galbraith to stumble, and the disguise slipped a little more, and it did from the relative safety of the high ground, morally speaking. That is an unmitigated win. Next, Colorado passes new protections for trans citizens. From KUSA, hurting, harassing, or intimidating a person because of their transgender identity is now considered a bias-motivated crime under Colorado state law. Jax Gonzalez, PhD, political director of the LGBTQ organization One Colorado, said they know the new law is a win, but not a complete victory. Quote, "It is definitely an identifier of progress that we value and care about trans Coloradans and that those identities are a protected class here in Colorado. According to data collected by the FBI, Colorado has seen a steady increase in hate crimes, currently over a 700% increase since the 2016 election. Quote, "We know that criminalization isn't going to end hate crimes," Gonzalez said. That really takes education and cultural shifts, and that includes both cultural shifts within schools and cultural shifts in society broadly, and that just doesn't happen overnight. Because of that, our queer and trans community and explicitly trans folks of color are pretty leery of reporting to police offices across the state and definitely here in Denver. We know that the solution to hate crime is education, it's resources, it's anti-poverty measures. While it's not the end goal of liberation, it is a step in the right direction where we can continue to protect transgender Coloradans. Next, an Ohio mom stands up for her trans daughter. From the Ohio Capital Journal. Bradie Anderson fears that she will be physically harmed if she uses the boys' bathroom at her Northeast Ohio high school. The 14-year-old sophomore is transgender, and her mom, Ann, said she has never had any issues with using the girls' room at school. Quote, "She's not going in the boys' bathroom," Ann said. "If my daughter went into the boys' bathroom, I would hate to think what would happen to her in there." But the Ohio House recently passed a bill that would ban transgender people like Bradie from using the bathroom and locker room that correctly corresponds with their gender identity. The bill now heads to the Senate for concurrence, but the legislators are on break until after the upcoming elections. Bradie's mom went on to say, quote, "The bathroom bill is going to get kids hurt and put them in harm's way. Why would anyone want to put any child, even if you don't understand who they are, in harm's way? If you don't look feminine enough, if you don't look masculine enough, are they going to be questioned? Cisgender people are also going to get pulled into this." The bathroom bill is one of many anti-LGBTQ+ bills Ohio lawmakers have introduced in the General Assembly, including one that would ban gender-affirming care and prevent transgender athletes from playing women's sports, and another that would force educators to out students to their parents. Ann said, quote, "These are our kids. They're not talking points. They're real kids. Bradie came out 8 years ago and was kicked out of Catholic school for being transgender, forcing her to switch to public school, where she started experiencing harassment from her middle school peers around the same time Ohio lawmakers started introducing anti-transgender legislation. The harassment has not stopped Bradie from advocating for herself and others. She has testified in committee meetings against the various anti-transgender bills and started speaking out at protests when she was 11, Ann said. But all of the anti-transgender legislation in Ohio is taking a toll on Bradie. Quote, "The last few weeks have been tough," Ann said. Bradie's been crying. She's been very upset. The combination of being harassed in our town that we live in and all of the anti-trans bills, especially the bathroom bill, is giving her major anxiety. Quote, "She's so much more than being transgender. She's sick of the adult bullies coming for her in this town, and a lot of them don't even have children in this school." Despite all of these proposed anti-transgender bills in Ohio, Bradie doesn't want to move away, and she shouldn't have to, Ann said. Quote, "I grew up here, and I'm not going to be run out of town because people are ignorant." Next, Cuba celebrates the nation's first transgender combat fighter. From the Associated Press, Ely Malik Reyes stepped onto the cordless platform and began delivering powerful punches and spectacular flying kicks against his combatant. He won a major victory that day by becoming the first transgender athlete to officially compete in a Cuban sports league. Reyes, a 26-year-old transgender man, competed for the first time in the male category of Sanda, a demanding contact sport that blends martial arts like Kung Fu with kickboxing. This milestone marked the latest step toward inclusion in Cuba, one of Latin America's most progressive countries when it comes to LGBTQ rights. Reyes himself acknowledges having to overcome challenges, including a lack of medications, a law that sets conditions to change his gender on his ID, and the suspicious looks he sometimes gets from people in the street. Quote, "Educating society doesn't happen in 2 days," he said. Reyes, who lives with his girlfriend in a colorful house on the outskirts of Havana, supports himself by repairing air conditioners, as his Sanda fights are unpaid. He has been on hormone therapy for 2 years, but his transition has been far from easy. It began over 4 years ago when he visited Cuba's Center for Sexual Education and consulted with a psychologist. He then saw endocrinologists and underwent tests to obtain a special card that allows Cubans to purchase medications at pharmacies, which enabled him to get the hormones he needed. But as Cuba's economic crisis deepened, medications became scarce, so he had to rely on other people who brought testosterone from abroad. While not illegal, the practice can be very expensive. He said, quote, "I'm an athlete. I can't neglect my hormone treatment. I have to stay on top of it." Changing his identity in official documents posed yet another challenge. While Reyes was able to legally change his name last year, his ID card still displays an F for female. That is because Cuba's current law requires full genital reassignment surgery for this change, something he does not want to do. LGBTQ activists in Cuba say a solution could come soon through a new civil registry law currently being drafted in the National Assembly. While Reyes' ID still formally identifies him as a female, sports authorities accepted his male status based on his hormone treatments, medical reports, and self-identification. This allowed him to compete in the male category of the Cuban Fighters League. Sports fans here at the TransPositions are thrilled to see how he does. Now, our top story. Over the last few years, the New York Times has grown increasingly biased against the trans community, but a change may be in the wind. This week, the venerable paper published a piece by Dr. Jack Turban. You may recognize that name from several of the papers in the TransPositions Discord reference section because in addition to being a working child psychiatrist, he's also a prolific researcher in the field of transgender healthcare. Today, he's offering guidance to help people who may have a hard time understanding gender issues communicate with the trans or gender diverse people in their lives. He writes, "Talking about gender understandably brings up a lot of feelings. We're having heated discussions around bathroom bills, gender-affirming medical care, and transgender athletes. Politicians opine about the dangers of gender ideology and children being mutilated and sterilized. Others have decried the rise in adolescents identifying as transgender and non-binary as a social contagion, likening gender diversity to a disease. It's easy to get overwhelmed and want to run away from these discussions altogether, but engaging with questions around gender identity with nuance is essential as national debates escalate. Gender identity, for all of us, isn't simple or binary. It's neither just biology nor just a social construct. There's dramatic variability in how people experience their gender identity beyond cisgender. That would be people who identify as the same sex as they were assigned at birth, and transgender, or even male and female. Younger people especially are opening up about gender and thinking about this part of their identities with more nuance and clarity than older generations typically have. In my clinical practice, I often help parents talk to their trans children about gender identity using a 3-part framework that I found allows people to better understand one another. Perhaps it can help all of us engage with today's political debates with more understanding and even help us, regardless of our gender identities, understand ourselves on a deeper level. The most basic part of gender identity is what I call our transcendent sense of gender. In a way that goes beyond language, people often just feel male or female, and some more strongly than others. This can manifest in different ways. Some of my young patients draw themselves as a certain gender and have a, "wow, this is me" feeling. Others have strong positive feelings when people use certain pronouns for them, or strong negative feelings when people use other pronouns. As is the case with many emotions, it's hard to describe this transcendent feeling in words, but it is the foundation of our gender identity. The scaffolding that we're born with. Research, including studies focused on twins, suggests these transcendent gender feelings have a strong innate biological basis. The next part of our gender identity is the social domain. As we move through life, we build on the biology of gender identity with language and social experience influenced by everything from the TV shows we watch to how we interact with our classmates and our families. Maybe you were raised to think women are nurturing, passive, and creative, while men are assertive and strong, or that dolls are for girls and football is for boys. What my work has taught me is that very few of us actually relate 100% to male or female social categories. Some people may love ballet and wrestling, or they may enjoy pickup trucks and knitting. To make it even more complicated, these feelings can evolve over time. The way an 18-year-old college student thinks about her womanhood is likely different from how she thinks about it when she becomes a 40-year-old mother of 3. The social aspect can cut both ways. For some people, rejecting gender role stereotypes is even more vital to their gender identity than adhering to them. I've had patients, for example, who hate the expectations placed on women in American society. They begin using they-them pronouns as a way to express rejection of those expectations. However, they love their birth names and bodies and had no interest in gender-affirming medical interventions. There are others who identify strongly as cisgender and express their rejection of gender stereotypes in other ways. The existence of one type of person does not invalidate the experience of another. The third part of gender identity is the physical domain. how we feel about our bodies. Some people identify as transgender and are happy with their bodies. Others are distressed by their gendered physical attributes. They may feel that their deepening voices or the shapes of their chests are at odds with their sense of self. This incongruence can lead to eating disorders, anxiety, or depression, which is when doctors may consider gender-affirming medical interventions. Among those who do have concerns with their physical sex characteristics, there is variation. For instance, many people have gender-related concerns about their chests, but not their genitals. Acknowledging this complexity, medical guidelines say it is essential for young people to have comprehensive mental health evaluations before initiating any gender-affirming medical intervention to ensure their treatment team has a broad understanding of their gender identity experience and the best ways, both medical and non-medical, to support them. Gender identity is complex. It's highly personal, and not everyone thinks about it the same way. To understand other people, we need to be flexible and listen to their self-conceptualizations, even when their frameworks are different from the ones we're used to. The three domains of transcendent sense of gender, social gender, and our relationships to our physical bodies can combine in nearly infinite ways. If we want to understand and support one another, we need to appreciate this complexity. And it may even help us understand our own identities in ways we never have before. And a follow-up on our previous story about WWE transgender superstar Gabby Tuft's return to wrestling. As you may recall, Gabby Tuft left for family reasons, transitioned while she was away, and 2 weeks ago came back with a vengeance. The full event has yet to be broadcast, but Gabby posted a short clip from 14 minutes into the 20-minute match, highlighting her signature move, Rebirth. Let's watch. You can't deny the words of the crowd. That is awesome. And do you know what else is awesome? Suing Ryan Walters. You may recall from a previous edition of the TransPositions, in addition to forcing Bibles into schools, in addition to enacting policies that directly lead to the deaths of students, in addition to being so incompetent he's been locked out of his own system for over 2 years, he's also the subject of a lawsuit by a student for violating a court order. It's been a minute, so here's the backstory. In February 2023, an Oklahoma student finalized the legal paperwork to change their gender marker and received a court order to direct the school to update their records. The school was fine with that. It's standard procedure, and you're kind of required to comply with court orders. The district was fine with it. The state was fine with it. But State Superintendent Ryan Walters, whose entire platform consists of screaming "death to trans kids," was not okay with it. So Ryan, like the playground bully he is, decided to throw a tantrum when the court said he couldn't have his way. He created an emergency rule for Oklahoma schools statewide that prohibits them from updating the gender markers of students without approval by the state-level Board of Education. Not only is that clearly in violation of both state and federal law, it's also a direct and deliberate act to obstruct the execution of a court order. Obviously, the student filed suit. Now, because the student is a literal child, the court agreed there is a legitimate safety concern and ordered that their identity should be kept anonymous. Ryan Walters, on the other hand, because he's the kind of guy who wakes up every morning thinking, what's the most cruel thing I can possibly do today, argued that whatever the court says, he has a right to expose the student's identity and age, school they attend, home address, and so on. This is your sneak peek of Christian nationalism, folks. Bibles in every classroom, totalitarian rule based on ideology with no regard to ability, and an absolute disregard for the rule of law mixed with a love of abusing personal power for maximum malice. Take notes and vote wisely this November. The good news, beyond the lawsuit itself, which might come to hold Raging Ryan accountable for at least one of his rapidly accumulating crimes, is that the student filed for an order of protection against Walters, citing his intent to dox the student with the declared goal of putting the child in danger intentionally, and this week, the court granted that order of protection. Of course, this whole thing started when Ryan acted specifically to spite a court order in the first place, so we'll keep an eye on this story to see how that goes. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to subscribe. Support our work by becoming a patron on patreon.com/TheTransPositions and reap heaps of benefits. Also, join us on Discord to find studies and other resources, keep up with our hosts, and enjoy the community's collection of quite cool memes. Our meme of the week was posted by Ascalon, and we can't help but agree. A nice dress is a nice dress. For the Transpositions, I've been Ember Belrad.